A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all honor, praises, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahushai, Ba'ashim, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us the truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai, back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson, and I pray and sincerely hope that this lesson is comforting and exhorting to you. Um, the title I have for today is Don't Allow a Woman's Education to Belittle You. I'm going to say that again. Don't allow a woman's education to belittle you. And what do I mean when I say that and I say education? Because we live in a culture and a society where a lot of our women, especially so-called black women, they go off to institutions, these different educational institutions, universities, colleges, and they might acquire lots of, knowledge in regards to certain things. So they might learn a lot about um, different so-called founding fathers of psychology or sociology, anthropology, you know, um, so-called women's studies and all these types of forth, right? So all these different philosophies that they learn within these different schools, right? Sometimes it could even be business related or whatever, right? And ever since the CVID years, a lot of our a lot of our men have actually been dropping out, right? They realize that this is they do like a cost benefit analysis, and they realize, man, this is not reaping much benefit for me, right? So I'm saying this to say, not to allow, just because they have the wisdom of this world, to essentially dampen your spirit, right? Don't to feel less of a person just because they might have a master's or a PhD or whatever, right? um, so I typed in um, belittle in Google here, and here it says to belittle someone means to make them feel small, unimportant, less capable through words or actions, often showing contempt or a desire to feel superior by putting them down. Excuse me. It says it involves disparaging their achievements and invalidating their feelings, or by using condescending remarks to undermine their confidence and value, essentially making them little in their own eyes or others. So that can also, how it's done, it says here, making demeaning comments, focusing on negatives, calling them names, downplaying someone's accomplishments, feelings, experiences, and unimportant, right? Condescension. And a lot of our women are very, very excellent at that, because what they do is they make you, they make a lot of you men to feel like, okay, you're less of a person, just because you might work a particular kind of job, especially brothers as well, right? Because a lot of us, we come from all different kinds of walks of life. Some of us actually have jobs where we work as blue collar, and those are not seen as, well favored in this society, right? So, as a matter of fact, I want to bring out two precepts, and I might come back to this, right? Um, So let me just go to something the Apostle Paul said, right? Just bear with me on this. This is First Corinthians chapter 3, verse 19, and it says, "For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with the Most High, for it is written, He taketh the wise in their own craftiness," right? So the wisdom of this world that they push and promote within the different universities and so on and so forth is not conducive to life. It's actually, it goes against life. A lot of it is philosophies that actually is set up to teach a lot of, and essentially not even teach, but indoctrinate our people, especially our women, because they excel at going to these institutions, to basically have a certain type of animosity. It creates a lot of animosity, and it creates that competition between um, the Israelite woman and the Israelite man, right? Whereas they're seen as they're basically kind of boasting in this sort of um, in their education. You know, they don't boast in actually having a husband because that's not something that the institution is going to teach you. It's not actually going to teach you how to please your husband, but it's going to teach you to kind of usurp your authority and have a certain type of um, clash with you and your husband, right? You know, so that is not something, you know, that is taught in schools. A lot of it is philosophies, whether it might be about free will, it could be about feminism, it could be about sexual liberation. Essentially, a lot of these different themes that they discuss is to basically destroy you and to destroy your household, destroy your nation, right? And something I was also meditating on recently is that Esau has very done a very fine and dandy job in conquering the minds of our women, right? So there was a point I made um, in regards to the blue collar, you know, brothers that might work a position that is more of a blue collar type of position. Excuse me. Um, this is let's give me 1 second. Let me just find this account real quick. Okay, this is Esther chapter 1, verse 17, and the point is in 20. So I just wanted to read it just to establish a little bit of context here. And it says, "For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes, when it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, the king commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto the king's princes, that we have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there be arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go forth a royal commandment from him, and let it be written in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, right? So essentially, this queen here, Vashti, she was supposed to make an appearance, because the king Ahasuerus summoned her. But she decided, okay, I'm not going to come and see you, right? So they understood that what happens above will trickle down onto the vibration of the women that are, I don't want to say lower, but I guess lower, you can say that, in a socioeconomic status. So maybe they weren't in a prestigious position, but maybe they were just, like, say for example, back in those times, you might have women that were they're at the mill grinding, corn, or she might be grinding wheat in order to make bread, right? That was one of the things that a lot of women did in the ancient times, where they would have these stones called a kern, and then they would grind it back and forth, you know, and then those wheat grains would be grinded into a powder, and that's what we call flour today, right? So, um, where was I? Just bear with me 1 second. Where was I? Okay, we just continuing on to verse 19. It says that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout the empire, for it is great, all wives shall give unto their husbands honor, both great and small, right? So there was essentially a decree put forth, so essentially it would establish a certain level of respect for the men that may not had a like the most prestigious positions, but they or even they probably had higher up positions, but at least with Vashti's deeds, that they would understand that there was a certain sentiment of honor, right? And this is what's lacking, within our women, within our and this society as well, because you can be a brother that may have right now currently, you don't work a prestigious position, but a lot of our women find it as a way to disrespect the Israelite man that actually works a 9 to 5, right? And is seen as a decent provider, but that for them is not enough. They don't see the value in that, right? So, and this is just an exhortation for brothers not to get too swayed by this, right? Because we have an understanding that is above the knowledge of this world, right? um Let me go to Ecclesiastes. you know this is Ecclesiastes chapter 8 verse 1. And it says here, who is as the wise man, and knoweth the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom maketh his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed, right? So, you know, the Lord uses he gives his secrets unto his servants the prophets to be able to have that understanding of everything, because we have an unction of the Holy One to know all things, and an unction is an anointing, right? So we have an understanding of the things that are playing out upon the planet Earth, right? And being able to give a lot of spiritual insight in regards to things that are actually playing out, within our own lives, especially in the lives of, if you have a woman, you can give her a lot of clarity and insight in regards to things that are occurring, right? Because, and that's one of the things you're not going to get from a carnal man, such as his institutions, such as Esau and his institutions, because he's a carnal man, right? What do the scriptures talk about when it comes to a carnal man? I'm sorry, it says natural. Okay, this is the one I was thinking of. 1 Corinthians 2 and 14, and it says, but the natural man receiveth not the Spirit of the Most High, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Here, look, check this out in the AMP here, and it says, but the natural man does not accept the teachings and the revelations of the Spirit of the Most High, for they are foolishness, absurd, and illogical to him, and he is incapable of understanding them, because they are spiritually discerned and appreciated, and he is unqualified to judge spiritual matters, right? Because he's not spiritual himself. And our people take on that vibration and thinking that this man, he's because he speaks very well, he's very eloquent, so to speak, you know, he has substance, he has the fatness of the earth, he has connections in this world. So our people, especially our women, they look at him and revere him as somebody who is very intelligent and important, right? But we know how the Lord chooses. The Lord doesn't deal with, these people, the Lord said, I have hid these things from the wise and crafty and given them unto babes, to roughly paraphrase, right? So you're not going to see these people like, the Gates, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos, actually giving, you understanding in regards to spiritual matters, right? Right. And going back to that precept I just read in regards to interpretations, right? Just to show you the value of the Israelite man within these particular situations, right? So I'm going to read this right here just as an example, right? Okay, so this is the book of Daniel, chapter 2. I'll start at verse 1 and I'll read down. And it says, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed the dreams, wherewith his spirit troubled. Excuse me. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded all the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans to to show the king his dreams. So they stood. I'm sorry. So they came and stood before the king, right? So all these different, magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, they were pretty much like the stargazers at that time. So people they observe they observe the different signs and um, different, how do you call it, events that occur in the heavens, right? And they give their so-called interpretation based on the different signs and scenes in the heavens going on and so forth, right? So they're basically were seen as the wise people of this time in ancient Babylon, right? um, this is verse 3. And it says here that the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell us thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. Verse 5. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If we will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if ye show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me many gifts and rewards and great honor. There showed me the dream and the interpretation thereof. The kings answered and said again, let the king and his servants the dream and show the interpretation of it, right? So I wanted to just jump 1 second. I want to jump in where it says, where it speaks about Daniel. Okay, so I'll jump down to verse 14, and it says, or 13, and a decree was put forth by the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. And it says, then Daniel answered the counsel and the wisdom of Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, and which was gone to slay the wise men of Babylon, and answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of hasty from the king? Then Arioch made this thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the Most High of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. And I'm reading this to show, what happened in the ancient times with this interaction here with Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, and essentially the wise people of that time, right? Just like how you have the wise people, of this current Babylon, this Babylon the Great. You have your Bill Gates, they're seen as the Elon Musks and so on and so forth. You have these people that are in the forefront of companies. They are the ones that are actually seen as those modern day wise men. They're seen as those modern day astrologers because they are actually giving and their so-called interpretation, right? But like I mentioned earlier, the Lord giveth his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. So the prophet here, Daniel, he was able to give Nebuchadnezzar the proper interpretation, right? And he essentially received favors, like what I read earlier in regards to the wisdom making a man's face to shine, right? Not to get so belittled by, what these, women think. Because going back into, because I'm reading this account, and this was, this took place in ancient Babylon. Now, a lot of the habits, a lot of their belief systems from a lot of these women that you might encounter, that a lot of that stuff, a lot of those philosophies, I should say, was encountered, that it came from, a lot of it came out of from ancient Babylon as well. Like when you, for example, because a lot of women might test you and try and think that they know you because of these different astrology signs and zodiac signs and so on and so forth, right? And they don't understand that all of that information, a lot of that goes back to ancient Babylon, because those ancient astrologers, they were paying homage to those different, gods, right? Those different Chaldeans and so on and so forth, the wise men at that time, they were just looking at the signs in the heaven, right? And these we know that the nation, the gods of the other nations are complete idols, right? So the Daniel here, he received that sort of favor, because he actually was able to give the Nebuchadnezzar the proper interpretation of his dreams and give him a sense of comfort, right? Right. That's why, going back to the title, not to allow women's education to belittle you and make you feel small, just because maybe you're not the type of brother that actually went to school for higher learning and so on and so forth, right? Let me just read this here in Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 23. And it says, "Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might, neither let the rich man glory in his riches. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord," right? So we boast in Yahweh Bashem Shai, of course, and these women, to show you the flip side of that, are women that a lot of them boast in their education. And that education is showing, as time goes on with this society, you're starting to see that how invaluable that education actually is, right? And another aspect I actually wanted to discuss from this lesson before I close it off, this lesson isn't to attack the how would you call that? This lesson isn't necessarily an attack on sincere sisters that actually might have a skill, or they might have a what's it called, a certain asset where they're able to actually add to their husband in their household. That's not what I'm saying here, because there are some skills that are extremely valuable, right? So for like women, like I was referring to in the ancient times, some of them would actually grind the wheat grains into this device known as a quern, where you would make wheat, right? And you might have women today that are they might be good at sewing, they might be good at certain recipes, putting certain recipes together, baking, all these things to add to a man and his household, is such a valuable asset, to a family, and to and such a service, I should say, sorry, to their to your children as well, you know. whether she might know some things about certain herbs and so on and so forth, right? But we as the men, we give the insight of how to actually guide our women into doing certain things. Okay, don't mix these two fabrics, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just using that as an example, right? Because we're not supposed to wear mixed fabrics. If she's into sewing and so on and so forth, she might have the information in regards to, okay, whether I'm just using sewing as an example, whether it could be cotton, she might know about the different types of cotton and so on and so forth, right? But you might properly instruct her, okay, this is the correct way to doing things, right? So I'm just using sewing as an example, but this is not to knock those aspects of knowledge. What I really am knocking is a lot of those philosophies that our women strongly boast in, that is essentially contrary to the Most High. And essentially what we're doing is tearing down those strongholds as Apostle Paul spoke of, tearing down those strongholds and bringing into obedience the captivity of all those different thoughts, right? I try to usurp the authority of a Mashiach Yahushua, because those things are not, when you hear them speak about these different philosophies and and so on and so forth, you realize a lot of it is just vanity, right? Okay, this is Genesis 3 and 6, and it says, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree might be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof and did eat, and also gave unto her husband with her, and did eat, right? So they took on those different philosophies that were not conducive to actual life. Wisdom of Solomon describes also that as odious works, because and there's another thing they also justify in these schools, right? You prioritizing yourself and offering your own children, right, through abortions, right? So that is a very, all these different philosophies, they trickle down and they mingle it and they package it properly in these different schools, and they make you think that what you're doing is right, right? You're being beguiled. Our women have been beguiled, where they think that they're following these different philosophies is essentially promoting life, but it's actually promoting you to sin and cause death upon yourself, cause destruction upon yourself, right? So anyways, I just thought I would discuss that, because it's just you're gonna run into women here and there, and they say certain things, and not to feel so broken when you're confronted with women that have these sorts of things, right? So anyways, I'll leave the lesson there. Oh, wait, before I close off the lesson, because when these women hear you speak, right, and the way they see you, the way you conduct yourself, right, they're gonna know that something is very different about you, right? So I just wanted to read this. One second, just as a okay, this is First Kings 4 and 30. I'll start at 29, and it says, and the Most High gave Solomon wisdom to understanding much, and largeness of heart, and of the sand that is of the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of the children of the east country, and all the wisdom of Egypt. I'm going to jump down to verse 33, and it says, and he spake of trees, and of the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even of the hyssop that springeth forth out of the wall, and spake of the beasts, of the fowl, and of the creeping things, and of the fishes. And there came all people to hear Solomon, the wisdom of Solomon, from all the kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom, right? So, even that interaction that you read about between Solomon and Queen of Sheba, she was essentially in awe at the way Solomon, and his kingdom and the servants and how they looked, right? Because Solomon was decked out in the spirit, right? So that's really the point here, right? To even though we don't have the substance of Solomon, right? We know that the scriptures talk about the things that are written aforetime are written for our learning, right? So we learn from Solomon's mistakes, we learn from our different forefathers' mistakes, right? And we're able to offer spiritual insight in regards to things that is deeply above the knowledge that they know, right? So, okay, I'll leave the lesson there, but I sincerely pray and hope that this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.